How are you?
Good, good. I think this is a fun thing we're doing. I like it. Are you getting feedback?
I am. I am. I get lots of questions, um, or people tuning in when they have an interest in the subject. So I'm excited for other things that we'll be creating together too. This is just
Oh,
trial, let's
cool.
say.
All right. So,
um,
what do you want to talk about?
okay, violence. So
Oh, my favorite, second favorite subject. And violence and autism, okay? Because it is the last time we'll be doing this on
yeah,
in Autism Awareness Month this year. So let's sort of make sure that we, if unless you had another wish.
no, 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 I
Okay.
don't.
All right. So
Um,
go.
I was speaking to a friend who works in a school, and most of the people she works with do have autism and they're young. And she was asking me, and that was a question and answer I wasn't really able to give her. What do you do when a child hits you? I've had several of these occasions in my work when we were doing neurofeedback, and it's always tricky. So, should I be
Yeah.
more
And
detailed about the scenario or?
well, first let me answer that because I get questions like that all the time where somebody writes in and says, how do I stop my child from hitting me? And I'm like, well, that's a real, how old is your child? What's going on at the time? What are the things that are happening before? What are the things happening? So that's the first thing for people to understand is when you hire someone to help you or when you reach out to get help, and you write down a question. Yes, I don't think you should write an essay because that's too much for the person receiving it, but we need some details, right? To give you any tangible, real help. Otherwise, I'm going to give you concepts that are, and I'm a conceptual teacher anyway. That's what I do. But I'm going to give you concepts that are so overarching, that are so generalized, that when you read it, you go, yeah, well, that won't work with my kid or something. And you won't really hear a resonance of truth in it. You'll just roll your eyes and turn the page. Whereas we might have been able to really help. So give some details, some really important details, and ask yourself, and this is true if you were talking about potty, if you're talking about speech, if you're talking about stims, it doesn't matter. Ask yourself, what's coming before that I see as a pattern? And the first thing you're going to say
Mm,
is there is no pattern. Refuse that of yourself and look for one anyway. Yes, you're going to be making it up at some level. You're going to be guessing at some level. But your guesses are based in your lived experience and probably have a kernel of what we're looking for. So look for a pattern to what's happening before the outburst, the hit, the scream, the meltdown, whatever it is, and give us a little story. If you
mm.
can't look for a pattern, give an exact example like you were about to do. So let's go with that. I just wanted to share that because it's so impossible to help people in any real way when they ask like that. So
Um, I mean, I don't have all the details, but it was 4-year-old boy, um, and I think she was basically just asking him to do something, um, and then it, and then he hit her. It wasn't, it's not. It's a 4-year-old at the end of the day, but it's still something that she said was recurrent, and there was no. What I had noticed with her is that she didn't do anything about it. And I remember from the times when I was working with you, you always say, "Don't ignore it." You know, talk about it. Be obvious about what's happening.
right.
That's all the details I have.
Well, I mean, you could give too much attention by talking about it too. You can make it worse because it's about how you talk about it, what you do. But
Mm,
don't ignore it's the first most important piece. Most people are taught to ignore it. Just ignore it; it'll go away. But it'll resurface in some other way. The ignoring, yes, you're not feeding it in the same way when you ignore it. Now, sometimes that feeds it. Sometimes a person is like, don't ignore me, right? So they're madder when you ignore them, right? And you're like, I'm not bothered at all. And they're not, right? So, and I'm laughing because it's a 4-year-old and he just looks like he's flailing around and stuff, but it isn't funny when they're 16. So let's figure it out at this very beginning point, right? When you just ignore it, you don't give a lesson, right? You don't teach what to do instead. You don't even teach the child that they're hurting you or they're hurting themselves because now they're not comfortable to play with, for example. So you're missing this opportunity to really inform this person on the cause and effect of their behavior. And so ignoring it, even if by ignoring it he stops and he only hits once or twice, you still missed that opportunity. And he's 4. And when he's 6, he still never got that because that was your style of teaching. He's 7 or 8, and now he's developed into someone who's stronger. And, it's not a smart way to go. But you also don't want to light him up and go, why did you hit me? Right? You're going for a timeout. That's it. Don't. Right. Because sometimes, and we're talking autism here, people, but the things I share are going to match for neurotypical little kids too, just sort of more toned down and at a different pace. When you are autistic, and especially if you have a communication challenge, it's so difficult to get your point across, to get someone to listen to you, to get what it is you want, to maybe you just want to be left alone to go and stim with your favorite toy and everybody's asking things of you and you trying to tell them. And so now you hit and they go into the mode of, well, I'll just ignore that. But they think they're ignoring it and not responding, but always they shift. Like sometimes they then give the kid what they want without realizing it. They leave the room. You know what I mean? If nothing else, even if they start yelling and screaming like I modeled, that took the child out of the state of total stress and confusion and got him into the fight or flight. And that's more fun, to be honest. When you're in fight or flight, you get bathed with all these hormones that are sort of, they're pain relieving. And there's a clarity in your thought because now everybody knows what they're after. I'm after getting you to listen to me as the adult. I'm mad. I feel better because I get to be mad. The child feels better because they get to really cry and scream while you put them in timeout. And everybody got to sort of clean their pipes. And now what happens is you get this as a routine. So it's like, oh, when I feel this horrible, confused feeling, okay, sorry, honey, I'm busy. You can't come in right now. And we have kids here too. I'd show you her, but we just don't have time. So adorable. So when you have this sort of habit of cleaning your pipes that way, then you're just going to start this cycling over and over and over again. Well, what if you cycled learning, learning, learning? Wouldn't that be a better cycle? So what do? You're asking him to do something and he hits you. Well, there's the physical change that you use, which is, come on, do it for me. And the child goes, and you go, oh, like a weight. You just drop your energy from this sort of motivated, bright, I'm reaching forward. Anyone who's done a Zoom knows this feeling. Like right now I'm being bright. I'm sending you my energy, right? If I sit here and I go like kind of like this, I get uglier, which is why I don't do it very often, but I'll do it for you right now. But you kind of, everything kind of droops and your energy drops and the child feels this vacuum between where you were and where you are. And you go, oh, you hit me. I was just trying to help you with your shoes, get your shoes on, but you hit me, so I don't know what to do. Maybe you want a different
Wait, sorry.
pair of
Do you
shoes.
mean that it's possible that they want that shift of energy, or that?
No, I'm saying that that shift of energy creates a way for them to listen. They don't like it.
So you're recommending to shift the energy?
Drop your energy. Not this shift. This
Yeah.
angry yelling shift rewards.
Mm,
This dropped energy shift creates this vacuum that makes them notice you differently than defending against you,
okay.
right? So defending against you, whether it's closing my ears or screaming louder than you or whatever, that engages two people in a fight, and it actually reinforces for each person what they're doing. So the adult getting mad reinforces their own feelings and thoughts and beliefs. The child fighting back reinforces their own thoughts and feelings and beliefs. And you don't get mileage that way. Ignoring left us with no learning, right? So now we have this other, thank you for interrupting me and getting me to be more clear. We have this other way of going, let's drop the energy, which that shift makes them go, what happened? And they pay attention. Their mind opens to what, for a second, you gotta use it. Not long, especially with autism. They open their mind to what you're about to do, and you immediately address what just happened. Oh, you hit me. I don't like being hit, and I was just trying to help you. And that's like, what? You were trying to help me? I thought you were telling me to do stuff. When let's say I was telling him to put on his shoes. I was just, letting you know that it's time to get your shoes on so we can go, and hopefully it's somewhere he wants to go, to the store or whatever. So now I'm talking slower. I drop my energy. They're paying attention, and they might go ahead and try to hit again. And now you have a whole bunch of different things that I would have to tell you. So I'm going to stick with this. But we could do violence every day. I mean, there's always
I'm sure.
a nuance, right? But this is the basic fundamental technique. And now, when I learned this technique, it was in Sunrise, and it was just about dropping the energy, and they didn't do the explanation. And the drop of the energy does work, and the slowing down and saying, I don't know what it is you want, keeps them from feeling like you're not listening to me. As you go and say, I don't know what it is you want. Maybe you want this different pair of shoes. So you're going pretty slow and you're delivering something new. And they're like, well, at least I'm in control. They get more comfortable
Okay.
because at least they're in control. And I'm serving them. So that usually reduces the anger and the acting out and turns it more useful into a learning tool. And in this process, you want to give them other ways of doing it. So say other shoe, like maybe teach a word, teach a sign, this is shoe. Like whatever it is that you're working with, teach pointing, teach whatever it is you're working with, you want to add a learning here while you're in this place of serving and being listened to. And say, next time you could just say that. But none of that will work if next time you ignore them. So usually parents have bad habits, right? They'll go, and next time I'll listen to you and I'll be watching. And next time they absolutely did not listen, right? So the child goes back to hitting. The parent doesn't even know they didn't listen. And they go, see, it doesn't work. But it does. To feel like you're being helped in the way that you want to be helped, that is very motivating for a child. And if they feel like you're wrong, but you're trying, they give you lots of room to figure it out. I hear your little one. Now,
Sorry.
what are you going to do about that crying? Are you just going to ignore it, or does someone have the reins? It's child day. I had one at the door. You have one. Yes, this is real life, people.
Yes, it's real life. It is.
Okay, so that's my answer. But I'm teaching you, Louloua. What was your thought? Did you understand?
I did, but then when you said out of learning, so there's two parts about this. One, I think that's what usually we get afraid of, which is, oh, in times of difficulty, to actually teach. I know we usually revert, and maybe we want to, step back, and even actually that drop of energy can actually be also a step back, but then maybe that could also be understood as, for the child, like, oh, you don't want to be with me, I scared you, or so if you're supposed to add a learning, are you saying that's also the way of saying, so should I say, for instance, oh, you if you don't want to put your shoes, no, let's take a step back. Instead of hitting me, is that something I should say? Like, instead of hitting me, can you please use your words? Do you prefer those other shoes than these shoes? Is that what you mean?
Um, yes and no. So this is where we get into, it depends on the age of the child. It depends on, have you exposed them to this technique before? Have you fluidly talked about different things? Like, so it's very much dependent upon each circumstance. There's not a right sentence. People want that. They want scripting, right? So I say this and then this and then it works. That's not a thing. It's not a thing. I'm sorry.
You mean it's not a thing that works? Or it's no,
It's
because
not
it's
a
a thing.
thing.
That's how
You
people
can't have
teach.
Yeah, you can't have a script that's going to then fix the problem, because now you say that first I drop my energy, then I say this, and then I say this, and it's all fixed. It's dependent upon what's going on. It's dependent upon the age of the child. It's dependent upon what they've been exposed to. It's dependent upon. So I'm sorry, it's just not a thing. I can't give you that. But what I can say is you're on the right track. Now, do I want to, as a child who just hits, I think you're more effective if you first show, then speak. If you haven't already done this song and dance, right? What you don't want to do is the same song and dance every time. That starts to become a reinforcer instead of a avoider. So
Mm.
what I mean is, if you say the same words every time, that then they know what you're going to say, and then they just hit you to make you say it. You become like the puppet, right? Oh, I want to hear you
Mm.
say that line. Boop. Right. So you have to be real. You have to be real, and you say, "Oh, this moment that I modeled for you, this, oh, you hit me, is different than most people do." And that moment itself, in various ways, because you don't want to do the same thing all the time, um, that's the moment of, whew, drop the energy, take a space moment, point out what he did. Sometimes they don't even know they hit you. They just, their hand just hit. Like, they're like, I'm just so mad, and that's an automatic reflex.
Mm.
And so it gives a moment to this, right? That doesn't so reward. You might, sometimes I go, I better step back. I don't want to be hit. Sometimes I put something between us. I make it about the hit. Depends on, I'm sorry, it just depends. There's not an answer. Um, but if you have this moment, you usually know where to go next. And if you don't, you make a little mess, and you think about it afterwards, and you go, oh, I should have done it this way. You teach yourself by their response and your response. That's just parenting.
Mm.
It doesn't matter the label, right? And sometimes they really are just hitting you out of some reflex, and they're completely unaware. And when they get it, then they stop. And a lot of kids, when you say it'll be really hard for you to have friends if you're hitting, they're very socially motivated. I don't care if it's a social disorder, they're very socially motivated. Sometimes they're motivated to be away from people because of that confusion and stuff. That's still an antisocial motivator, but it's got social at its base. But they usually want friends, but they don't want the difficulty of friends. And so the more that you can help with how to be a friend, and hitting fits there. Hitting's not a way to be a friend. Um, and I'm a friend. So it's hard for me to be your friend and play with you if you're hitting me. So you do all that, but really there's not an answer. There is a technique. You drop your energy, you give it this moment to go, wow, you shouldn't hit that, I don't want to be hit. That hurts. Or, um, if you hit people, then I have to keep you away from your little sister because I'd be worried about it. If you like real things that would matter to the child.
But then you don't offer an alternative,
Well, then I
obviously,
usually go, usually I
depending
show a
on.
confusion. Usually I show a confusion. Like when I get hit, I can't even figure out how to put on a shoe. And I was going to help you if you couldn't do it. So now I show that the hit had a negative consequence with what they were trying to make happen. Okay, I feel better. I think we can do this. Let's do it together. Let's put the shoe on. So I just said it different every time, didn't I? Because there's not a right answer. There's these basic steps. Respond to the hit, point out the hit with dropped energy, not raised energy. Do a physical response that way. And then become user friendly to solve the problem. And in there, offer a learning. Not learning first usually in the beginning of this. But once they know this rhythm, you're going to be coming out of the gate with the learning. So it evolves. It has to evolve. People evolve and grow and learn your tricks, right? So you can't use the same tricks, techniques, whatever you want to call it.
And how much is hitting? How much does it have to do with their sensory experience? So how do you know if it's something that you caused, or that is something that you did, or was it there and then you kind of pressed on something that just made them, were they already uncomfortable? Again, I know this is a really big question.
Yeah, but I mean, it's an important one because people, what they do is they go, well, he had a sensory issue, and they excuse the child. And again, there's a rhythm here. First of all, were you talking really loud and they had their fingers in their ears and then they hit you? No, it's not too hard to figure out what happened.
So yeah, that's what I get most from parents is the problem, the hiding of the closing the ears and their sensory experience, or is it because they spoke loud?
No, the problem is that you're letting them get away with hitting in a way that's not useful. So they have an issue, right? I have pain in my right ankle. So if my granddaughter wants me to run and she really, really wants it so bad that she insists on it and I run it, it hurts my ankle, can I hit her?
Okay.
I mean, it's my responsibility, right? So why would at the very beginning of a diagnosis, so many parents go, yeah, but it wasn't his fault. It was having, there was sensory overload. No, it's not about fault. It's about learning. Your child's job is to manipulate you. That's their job.
Like any child.
Any child. Every child's job is to manipulate the parent to get the breast milk, to get the diaper change, to get they're cold. They need you to put a blanket on them. From second one, they have to learn how to be good manipulators. And so that's built in. And if we misteach, what we will respond to will end up in a big mess. So you have this child who has a sensory issue. You want to help them with their sensory issue. You don't want to teach them that it's not their fault that they hit. These are separate things and you must separate them out. So you might say to that child, well, I was having so much fun. I got really loud and your hands are on your ears. So maybe it was too loud for you. So I'm sorry about that. But Hitting's a different situation. So now I'm going to be really, really loud. Or maybe you'll go, so I'm going to be really quiet from now on because you know where you're at with this child,
Mm.
right? You don't want to torment them and say, okay, I'm going to do sensory exposure therapy and I'm going to yell in your face constantly. That's like torture. But at the same time, there is some of that. You do want someone who has sensory issues to get that sensory exposure desensitization, not the opposite. And I see that in families with autism. They go, oh, he has a sensory problem. Don't do that. Turn down the lights, quiet, make everybody quiet. So there's no healing path there. In fact, it makes it worse. They need some of that, not all of that. And in the meantime, no matter what you do, don't teach anybody that they can't help hitting you if they have a sensory overwhelm. It may be hard and it may take lots and lots of repetition, but they can learn not to hit. And they need to learn it while they're little because it's going to get ugly if they're still doing it when they're older.
Okay. And how would neurofeedback come into play with violence in general? I know violence. Sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna tell the audience also. Violence is something that we experienced with my brother, and everything she said, rang true 100%. But we also had neurofeedback, so maybe we can briefly talk about that.
Yeah. So with violence, there are some common things that I've seen in autism. And one of them is there's a certain presentation of wave behavior in the right temporal lobe and sometimes brain wide. And it's like a little almost rhythmic spiking that's happening. It's not a seizure. It's not even a paroxysmal because it almost looks like a pulse. When I treat the temporal lobe with low frequency rewarding, then it usually mitigates that. Now, again, neurofeedback is as complex as my answer to what should you say, what should you do. So that won't always be true, but it's a nice starting point. And you're looking to see with neurofeedback, you're looking to see what's out of balance, what's the problem here. They may be hitting. And then you match that, by the way, with what happened before. When did they hit? Why did they hit? That all comes together. If you think it's just the right temporal lobe and it turns out that person hits when they're sort of getting a traffic jam in the left frontal lobe because it's not developed enough and people talk too fast and I can't think at that rate and I can't process at that rate. And now I've got this sort of traffic jam of inputting information. And my way is to scream and hit to clear that all out and slow the world down. Then going to the right temporal lobe might have made it worse. So you do want to, be careful about just taking these one answer choices, but it is a nice starting point especially if it's a sort of a sensory outburst that you're hearing about. The right temporal lobe is a good place to go.
So the idea would be also, while we're doing the teaching and the slowing down, and while behaviorally we're doing all the efforts as a family, I think what neurofeedback also does is it just speeds up that learning in a way, and it helps. Helps the individual have also more control about what he or she can do with that.
Well, and they're hopefully, if you're doing a good job with your neurofeedback, their impulse to hit is lessened, right? So now instead of having the impulse to hit that they would have acted on 10 times, that happens twice. Now it's easier for the family because there's been a reduction in that behavior and they're able to see it more clearly. They don't feel lost in this sort of multitude of issues.
Yeah. I remember with Milo, we used to, everything was so gray. It was hard to see black and white. But whenever we knew that he was about to have a tantrum, and so Milo's tantrum were always violent, and then he would end up hitting whoever was next to him. and himself. And I mean, you know all this. I'm just telling whoever's listening. And whenever we knew it could be coming, we would all be ready for it. And I remember you teaching us that we were actually then encouraging it to happen, because
Right.
like you're saying, like our energy wouldn't drop. We would, if anything, we were just encouraging him and telling him, okay, we're ready. Here it goes.
Yeah.
And I
There's a
think, yeah, that
cycle.
happens to hitting and violence, and we get this, you know, it's going to
Right.
happen. And
Yeah.
yeah, the
Yeah.
cycle just goes on and on.
Well, and this is a good thing to just hit on, because it's true of every it's a cycle of abuse, right? So for families that aren't even talking about autism or something, maybe somebody's listening and they have a cycle like that happening with their spouse or whatever. So basically you have the outburst, then the honeymoon period where they're super nice, and then you have the sort of build up period where you can feel it coming, and then you have the explosion, and then you have the honeymoon period, and then and so there's this cycle that happens, and it's a cycle similar to a drug cycle where you shoot up, you go, it starts to evaporate through your body or disseminate through your body, and then you've used it up, and now you're starting to just you feel a little bit more normal for a little bit, and then you're starting to feel edgy and the craving's starting to happen, and before you know it, you're ready, you're on you're jonesing and you need that shot again. It's the same cycle, but it's internal hormones that you're addicted to, for both people, the victim and the abuser. So when you're working with someone who has all this stuff, the sensory integration and all these things, they're going through these cycles internally, right? And then we become a part of the cycle feed. And when we tense up, we're adding edginess to their already edgy state. And they're going, I'm trying not to go there, but your edginess is just killing me. Right?
Yeah, that's what it is.
Right. And there's a feeling for that person of, look, I know it's going to happen. Let's just make it happen and get it over with so we can get to the honeymoon. Like the person going, okay, I know I'm going to buy the drugs. Let's just buy the drugs so I can get to the moment of the good. Right.
Yeah.
And very often this action is to get to the good part. So in a way, that's what I mean by they're manipulating incorrectly, right? So in a way, they're trying to do something nice in this perverted kind of twisted way. Let's get over here to this part where we all love each other. And the only way I know is through this outburst. And when you're autistic, that really is the only way you know, unless people are teaching you another way and giving you that beautiful part all along. And that's another problem. And I think it's a really good point that we can kind of close on, unless you want to do the teaching
No,
now.
we're good.
Because I'm kind of mad at myself. I promised myself today I'm just going to make her answer the questions next time. This moment where you're in this honeymoon period, if your honeymoon period is most of the time, then you're not feeding the cycle. But what really happens is everyone else does this too. They enjoy the honeymoon period. They feel resentful that they got there because of a outburst. They take their turn at being kind of cranky, and that starts the build up and keeps you in the cycle. But what if you just are awesome all the time? Complimentary, loving, giving bright, sparkly eyes to the person who's got autism, or your husband or your other children. What if you're the person? I know that's too much to ask, but try, rise up, be the person that isn't feeding the cycle, that's actually feeding. We're still in the honeymoon, still great here, it's awesome here. Then you're going to reduce that cycling by so much. Someone else will do it though. It'll still happen, but at least you can do your part.
That's awesome.
Okay.
Great closing. Okay. Thanks, Lynette.
You're
Bye.
welcome. Bye. You're on next time.
Am I?